Hi, my name is Lucille, and I'm going to present you what we've done with MIM this week at OceanHackWeek 2023. Um, it is a project about passive acoustics. Um, the initial aims were to use open access acoustic datasets and extract some acoustic metrics from the soundscape. Then we would fetch some other variables available from the same locations to explore links and correlations. I've divided our work in two steps. The first one was to work with an Australian dataset that's available online from IMOS. The first step was to load and read these files, which are encoded in binaries, and plot some spectrograms. The second, our second goal was to work with dataset from the US, accessible from MBARI. And again, load and read these files, which are WAV files, plot a long-term spectral averages, and try and link these spectrograms with vessel data that we can get from the region, from AIS data. So for the step one, this is just the URL for the data that we use. We specifically use the data from Kangaroo Island in South Australia, available at this URL. And yet we managed to load and decipher these binary files and plot a spectrogram. However, they're files which are 300 seconds only, and so the next step would be to stitch them together to get a longer time window on these spectrograms. We did encounter a lot of challenges to decipher this data, and something we've not done yet is to link each recording to the calibration files that are also available online, to actually calibrate this data and to get the absolute pressure levels. And yeah, I'm afraid we ran out of time to finish this step. In the meantime, we worked on the dataset from the US, which is an extensive dataset, recorded on the west coast of the US, near Monterey Bay. It's a location called Mars. And this data is easier to work with because it is saved as WAV files. So we could readily load them and plot them as a long-term spectrogram. This is one example of an hour of data recorded on January 2021. And we pulled the vessel data from a diameter around this Mars location at this very time. And we can see here that we've got one vessel not too far from the recorder, passing. The time is here, 1 p.m. And so we believe that's probably this low frequency trace that we can see on the spectrogram here, which if we continue this vessel data, it's through the whole hour. And here as well, we can see it is present. It definitely increases. So probably get closer to the point about 1:30. And yeah, the frequencies are quite typical of boat noise, lower than 1000 hertz. So it could be that. The challenges we encounter with this was to actually work with the data online. We had to save the files locally first. So that's something we would like to improve, and also run this in batch to be able to study a larger temporal window and actually do some statistics. We would like to acknowledge the help from Alessio and Marti, especially to upload the data and decipher the binary files. And I think that's it for me today. Thank you for your attention.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for watching our presentation in the Ocean Hack Week 2023. The title of our presentation is Direct Georeferencing of Drone Image. Our motivation is that these unmanned aerial vehicles are great for mapping and monitoring of marine areas. As you can see in the presentation, we have an image from, and you can see a turtle. So one of the questions is that we want to know if this turtle is the same or is showing in the two pictures. So, but we have a problem. This technique of the mapping images in the land. It's easy, but not in shallow waters, because we have waves, and also the water can have some turbidity. In order to assess or to accomplish our main goal, that it's like mapping the and monitoring an image through a different technique that is not photogrammetry, we are going to use a direct georeferencing technique. But this process requires a lot of information, such as the camera sensor characteristics, monitoring measurements, the altitude in X, Y, and Z position, and any others. And also, there is another problem, that is that we have many rotations and translations between the different reference frames. So this is like the main idea that we want to solve in this slide. You can see two different images from two different angles. So, and then we have on the right side a drone image, and in that image you can see that the image have like a tree freedom, and then the drone can rotate, and then you can have three different angles. One is for the pitch angle axis, or the roll axis, and jog axis. So the main problem that we have is that if we just use the regular Euler angles, we just are counting two axes, just basically the X and Y axis. In order to just account all the rotations, we need to use a different reference system that is not the Euler angles, and in that way we can account for the three for the jump, pitch, and roll angles. But so basically, the first steps that we need to do to have a very good projections of the drones and into the land is to account the distortion of the camera. In order to check that, we need to consider the focal distance and also the dimensions of the sensor of the camera. That's the first step. And in the second steps, we also need to account that the camera is mounted in a gimbal. And this gimbal frame has also three different angles. In the third steps, with a part of the gimbal, we have the drone. And the drone has the GPS information. And also GPS information has three different angles. So if we want to just know the correct projection of one point in the land or in the ground, we need to account one of the reference systems that has the gimbal and another reference systems that has the GPS of the drone. So basically, that what we do in this project is to detect objects using one of the programs that calls Level Me. Um, but in order to explain this, I will give the word to my colleague also.
Hi everyone. We mainly carried out the work as you can see in this presentation. First of all, which involved detecting objects, currently known as reference points rather than ground control points. And we found the pixel position through image processing. After that, we obtained the position of the drone and the gimbal angles from the survey data and combined this to form a training data set. In addition to that, we also obtained data about the camera sensor parameters and also collected EXIF metadata from the images. So following that, we identified a coordinate transform method, which was accomplished using the camera transform Python package, and we used it to reproject the pixel positions. And after that, we calculated the reprojected pixel positions and plotted it against the drone images. So here are some results. So the training dataset was based on a drone survey at Kensington in February of this year. And we used the camera transform package with basic drone information. And in this image, in this drone image, you can see in blue the reference points and in red the reprojected points. And we have also a histogram on the top right corner showing the distance from the GCP to the reprojection points in pixels. So that's roughly on average 300 pixels. And on land, that probably translates to around 5 to 10 meters of error. So there's quite a lot that we need to do, and this is just a very first step in achieving our goals. So the challenges we faced, we had a lot of difficulty in setting up the environment on OceanHackWeek Jupyter Cloud. So we mainly worked on our local systems. At the same time, we spent maybe a day or two on understanding the camera transform packages, the 3D coordinate systems, PyTorch 3D and OpenCV, and a few other packages to understand the rotation of coordinate systems. And also some of us were really dependent on MATLAB. So where do we go from here? Since we were working locally, there were a couple of file paths and other things that we are a bit OS dependent. So we would like to make the notebooks and code more generic so that they can be used by others. We would also ideally account for more reference frames and rotations to reduce this error. And after that, we would probably want to process the GNSS observation Rhinex files, which has a lot more detail, and a lot more post-processing can be used to obtain accurate drone position data. And after that, of course, extending this workflow to to 3D using PyTorch 3D or something equivalent, so that it really becomes a lot more relevant for marine applications. Thank you. This is our team. This is from left to right: Nick, Paul, Diana, and me, Alison. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. So I am going to share the work that the group that called Marine Distribution Models has done, species distribution models. So essentially, the motivation for this project was that one of the leaders was actually going to carry out a hackathon in India, and she wanted to develop marine distribution, species distribution model with a marine focus, which is very rare. And then she wanted to have it all focus on India, or like a region near India. So what we've done here is set up kind of documentation that gives a lot of background. There's a lot of documented steps, like what exactly we're meant to be doing, additional information about us and stuff like that. Then we have the tutorial folder. It has a few notebooks, mostly based in R, although I have one in Python at the moment as well that we will be reviewing. So we go step by step. As you can see, there are number, and it just goes through. We create the area that we're interested in. Then we go and like obtain presence data. We are looking at sea turtles for this example, and just getting data from OBIS. So it goes through there, like how do we access the data, how we clean it, how we make little maps. Then how to do, because we don't have absences, how to do kind of pseudo absences of background points. And then it goes into extracting the environmental data and actually doing the models. So one of these, the one that says PDF here, it's actually the result of that model. They use MaxNet. So this is the result, the probability that sea turtles, loggerhead turtles, I believe is this one, will be present in a particular area. So the darker colors, it's highest probability, as you can see in this area here. The whites, or kind of like more bluish colors, less likely. And this is all open source. All the data that is used, has been included in there. And there's this Python notebook that is under review about like showing a different way to obtain environmental data. And yeah, it should be ready soon. They are working on actually making this a website as well. So it's pretty cool. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
So we've been working together on the SST project. As you can see, we had a fairly large group with various levels of expertise around machine learning and deep learning, but we were all able to learn and help each other, which I think is just as important as the actual outputs. As oceanographers and climate scientists, I'm sure I don't need to tell you the importance of being able to predict SST. It has implications not only in marine ecosystems, but also weather systems, and at the other end of the spectrum, it strongly influences bacterial growth at the microscopic scale, just to name a few implications. The area of interest that was selected is particularly important, as there are many diverse coral reefs in the Maldives of the Arabian Peninsula and in the Western Indian Ocean as a whole. And of course, there's an enormous diversity of marine life. This was also for more practical reasons, as we don't have access to massive compute resources to study larger areas, cheaply at least. There's a few more reasons why this problem space is important, but the key takeaway from this slide is that SST is a critical indicator of ocean health and climate pattern. So our task for this week was to predict SST spatial distribution for the following day based off some machine learning models that we built. Jure and the Seattle team had a really good handle on what they were doing, and while we were still fumbling around on the first 2 days trying to align our environments and trying to figure out what to do, they had already fleshed out a convolution long short-term memory model, and also a transform-based model built to predict SST. So I can't speak too much on the convolution long short term model, which from now on I'll be calling conv-LSTM, since the Seattle team developed it. But basically it's a type of recurrent neural network with high memory power to remember the outputs of each node for an extended period to produce the outcome for the next node efficiently. And they also looked at a transformer model where the main difference is that the architecture utilizes something called self-attention. In layman's terms, that's similar to like when you're reading a sentence and you're not putting all of your attention onto the word you're looking at, but you're also thinking about the previous words to help you understand context. And the final step was actually combining the models, where with a bit of tweaking, I believe you can feed the output of the conv-LSTM model into the transform architecture. So this was the transformer model run on ERA5 data. I'm not sure if you can see, but basically you can see it's quite accurate. This red box, this value in the red box is, I think, 0.3 or so. And just visually looking at the comparison between the predicted output on the left and the true output on the right, it's quite similar. So that was a really good result. The conv-LSTM improved this accuracy, I think down to can't see the exact number, but it was better. And again, you can see it's quite accurate. An interesting result here is that the models combined, the value was a bit less accurate, I think, than the conv-LSTM on its own. And this next slide, compares the mean standard errors. So as you can see, the conv-LSTM is really accurate, transformer a bit less so. Both combined a bit less than conv-LSTM. So that was the ERA5 data. We also had available a NASA MER data set, which was higher resolution. It had a slightly different time range, but it had some pre-existing masks for us to use. So 3D CNN is just another model, another type of convolutional neural network. So I was actually quite shocked with this because the number here is 0.009, which should suggest that's quite accurate, but apparently this is the important number, which is, I think, 0.3 or so. And due to being unable to figure out why we had these like square or like lines, and also the landmass not applying properly, obviously the two outputs are quite different. But if you don't factor that in, I think it's a fairly accurate model. And this next slide just shows that, again, conv-LSTM performs very well. And here is, it's meant to be animated, but Boris from Seattle put this together, and it basically shows a few date ranges, I think a week's worth of data. Okay.
The animation works in Google, but
No.
when I downloaded it in the presentation form, it's just not working.
Okay. Anyway, it's not too important. Again, you can see the MER data set is super accurate. The LSTM model 0.04 really accurate. Our model 0.2 a bit less so. Can't speak too much on this. I think the Seattle team have like ideas to use these outputs for upwelling prediction.
While I was developing the 3D convolution model, I was just trying to use a new method, which is Python-enabled empirical mode decomposition. So this method actually used to decompose the frequency data into a number of oscillatory components. That's called intrinsic mode functions. I'm still learning like how to read those results. But as far I understood that this kind of method used when there is the data, if it has got any nonlinearity in their signals, and it might be non-stationary, which is according to my knowledge that I developed in last few days, that sea surface temperature could be non-stationary, and there definitely be a non-linearity present. And also my aim to use this method to make the high resolution mode data into a more manageable and manageable important information, so that we can use that manageable data to train the convolution model, and we don't need any GPU and a large course for that. But also my aim to see if there is any interesting trend we can find out in the frequency results. And for particular this work, I'm just using EMD, time frequency analysis. And also this method helped me to get rid of the NaN values when it has got a technique where we can actually get rid of the time dimension, which is not a good idea, but there is a method that it can actually get rid the time dimension to get the median value and then calculate the frequency. And this is some results that I have put here. So actually IMF can give you 9 phases, but I just put 2 phases, and I still need to understand what we can get from this frequency data. If we go to the next slide, please. So the challenges with PyEMD, what I said, that we can get rid of the time dimension. If we do that, we cannot able to use the information into convolution 2D model, because in a convolution model, we need 2 components. One is target and another is the input features. And it's never be of the same size if we just get rid of 1 dimension. That is time, and that is quite important. And that's why I try to not use any median, like not to group the time dimension into median value or mean value. But then we realize that PyEMD function has got a problem and it cannot deal with NaN values. So somehow I cannot use this, whatever PyEMD has resulted, I cannot able to pass that data to how to use in convolution 3D model. And another thing that I also find out, the Mars data has got a lot of NaN values, and I tried a few different techniques, like resampling the time dimension, and it figured out even with 7-day resample, it has got all the time dimension actually resulted as NaN. So I just think that we need to understand how the data has been collected and stored, so that we can understand how we can deal with that time dimension. And for my future work, if I can contribute to this work, my first task is to understand how to resample the time, and if we can get any information out of it. And the second task would be great if we can change the source code of the PyEMD method to get it more compatible to work with NaN values, so that we can just use as the data it is, and we can extract the frequency information, and there is no problem in the data structure, and we can definitely generate a target and the input features to feed into the convolution model. So here I am at this moment.
Yeah, we came across several challenges during this project, but in summary, we achieved a lot as well. A lot of us, this was our first exposure to deep learning, and we learned a ton. And eventually, yeah, we figured out how to, actually run the model and make it finish running without errors. Next year, I might get the easy team to beef up the OceanHackWeek platform a bit. Yeah, that's it.
So yeah, our project was to investigate the variability of the South Australian upwelling system. And but before, I'm just gonna explain. Oh, sorry. Explain a little bit about how IMOS works, so where Marty and I work. So integrated marine observing system. So we have a number of platforms deployed along Australia, along the shores of Australia, collecting different types of data that include physical and oceanography data, but also biological data. For this project, we only use the national reference stations and the coastal moorings, and the AODN, which is where our data is stored. And in real life, they look like this. So the AODN is pretty much Marty and other people, but Marty here. And this is how the national reference stations and the coastal moorings look like. So the coastal moorings are a bit more simpler, but like the national reference stations, they is simply equipment that is moored in a specific location. And then with the addition that in the national reference stations, they do biogeochemical sampling every month as well. So, and then we have a number of those in Queensland, one in Queensland, one in South Australia, one in WA, one in Tasmania, and one in New South Wales, which kind of anchors the other platforms that we have. And then everything is stored on the AODN portal, and it's all accessible and free. So all the data that has been used in this OceanHack is available for everyone to use and replicate as well. But then getting to it, so basically the context of this is that past year I was here at OceanHack, and then I had a look at the data in South Australia, and then I noticed there was an anomaly here that caught my eye a little bit. So basically there's lots of, the temperature is really high and anomalously high on the year of 2013 in South Australia, which is a place where you have upwelling, a seasonal upwelling. And I felt like, why is that happening? But so then first, what is an upwelling? I don't know if everyone here has an oceanography background, but essentially is a process within the coast that brings nutrients and enriches the area by bringing waters that are at the bottom and then bring them up the coast and make nutrients available for phytoplankton. And then, of course, you increase the productivity of the area as you go. But then why is that important? So in South Australia, for instance, this upwelling, it is seasonal. So it doesn't occur the whole year like it would happen in California and other places, but like it is a seasonal upwelling. It goes from November to May, and it's extremely important for the fisheries, so commercial fisheries in the area, but also for the ecosystem in general, and also to a certain extent for carbon pumping as well. And so it does, upwellings have an ecological, economic, and scientific importance, and also in South Australia, even though it is seasonal. So then we structured the project around that finding of that year, but also trying to understand, one, the variability of the area and what is driving this variability that we are observing. So we created, so we structured, oh, why is it looking a bit weird? Anyway, so it's issue, but yeah, it's structured in issues, and then let's go to the first one, and maybe that will look easier. Yeah, so the issue one was to create a subset of the data. So when you go to the AODN, you have all these different reference stations and different data from different instruments. Even within the moorings, you have different instruments collecting the same variable, so you need to filter for that. And then as it turns out, it was not that simple. When Marty started looking at it, when Vinny started it, we identified that it was spooling data from the ADCP as well, which was not ideal. And then Marty tried to filter that, and then we discovered something else. So then, you know, that this simply let's do a subset of data wasn't quite easy. Here is the availability of the moorings in the area. So this is the national reference station, and everything that is red is still collecting data, and the others, they had data for a while, but they are inactive at the moment, but they still had data in the past. So then the issue two, we were just doing temperature time series and anomalies, climatologies, trying to characterize the area and understand and create and build this background so we could start entering relationships with climate modes, for example, because the great question is, so if we have a driver for this regional change, is this driver remote? And then it's driving issues locally. And then one of the most known remote drivers would be the atmosphere. So you would be the climate modes, so such as the Southern Angler mode and ENSO, but also the Indian dipole. But they were all neutral for 2013, which was the year that we identified that had a suppression. So that was a bit, it was interesting because you would expect that something different was going on.